So this was done at the South Central Ag Lab and at the Lincoln Agronomy Farm, 2 locations. Both places we did at dry land, because I think that was our hypothesis. It's the lack of water that's going to be the biggest issue. And I've set these charts up in a format that we call the critical weed removal timing. So over here on this axis we have relative yield, % of weed free. And we had one treatment that we started in November where we removed the winter annual weeds about November 1st, and then we kept the weeds out of that field for the rest of the year until we harvested the next year. So it was essentially weed free November to November. We had another removal timing that started March 15th, another one April 1st, April 15th, May 1st, May 15th, June 1st, and June 15th. So that's what those dots represent. We picked a planting date of May 15th. I recognize it's probably later than is optimum, but that's where we went, just because people that mismanage the winter annuals, I think, tend to be a little bit later in their planting. Across the bottom we have growing degree days accumulated. So this is the number of growing degree days above a temperature of 0. Why would we use a base of 0? Okay, we're dealing with winter annual weeds, so anything above 0, there's the potential for them to put on some biomass. They're adapted to that. A lot different from our corn. Okay, so the 2 lines that we're interested in, the first is this purple line. Well, actually, the blue dotted line across here shows 5% yield loss relative to the weed-free yield. Okay, and so kind of as a standard weed scientist say, if you lose more than 5%, you probably really need to be thinking hard about control options. So the purple line down here shows the growing degree days that is accumulated at the point where our curve crosses that 5% threshold. And in this year, that corresponded to April 12th. We'd lost 5% of our yield. 2009 out at the South Central Ag Lab. By the time of May 15th, we had lost that 17% yield. If we look at the other 5 years, 2007, at Lincoln, our 5% date was April 14th, and we lost 15% by May 15th. At Scal, this was our odd year. May 30th was our 5% date. So even leaving winter wheat and the other winter annuals that we had growing in that field, we only lost 4%. In Lincoln, in 2008, our date was March 26th. I don't know if anybody remembers back to the spring of 2008, but it was very warm in March. And so the henbit exploded early that year. So we had a thick carpet of henbit, and it really seemed to zap the soybeans early. So 16% there. 2008 at Scal, we only lost 6%, so not quite as severe. 2009 at Lincoln, it was 17% by the time of planting. So we ranged from March 20th all the way to the end of May. But our thinking and consensus is you probably want to have a burn down on if you've got a winter annual weed problem no later than April 15th. Okay, corn tells a similar story. This is from the South Central Ag Lab in 2009. We crossed our 5% threshold right here on May 4th. So we got lucky. We used the same May 15th planting date for corn that we did for soybeans. Again, I recognize that it's late. And I have a typo here. It's actually 9% yield loss by the time of planting. If we look at the range, corn seems to be not quite as affected as soybeans, which is just contrary to what I think most people think about. 2007 in Lincoln, it was May 15th. At Scal, it was April 30th, and we were in that 12 to 13% range for yield loss and planting. 2008, it was earlier, April 22nd and April 15th, still in the 11 to 12% yield loss of planting. In 2009, have no good explanation, but in this particular year, it didn't happen until after June 15th, and you only lost 2% by May. So 5 of 6 years, by the time of planting, we'd passed that critical threshold of 5% yield loss, and in 4 of the 6 years, we'd lost greater than 10%, all in very moist and favorable environments.
Here was to try to mimic the study that we were talking about in there, and then to also display the value of residual chemistries in protecting yield and the effect on crop growth. A lot of times we wish we could have field days when the effects are readily evident. We get to here, and a lot of times things kind of look the same. So what we did here, we had some pretty striking differences between treatments earlier in the season, and we took pictures of that to try to relate back to what we were seeing. So the top row of pictures here is a burned down winter annual removal with a residual chemistry in the mix. The bottom is burned down glyphosate only in soybeans, and glyphosate and a growth regulator 2,4-D in the corn. If we look at these plots out here, obviously with the untreated, we have a very definite visual effect on corn growth here. With the mid-April removal timing, we have a lot of goosegrass in here, but this came up really late in here. So let's look at the corn here in comparison to some of these other treatments. So you have your removal timing. These pictures were taken June 18th this year. So it's basically, this picture is 2 months removed from treatment, 1 month removed from treatment, and then shortly after that treatment there. And what you can see early on in these pictures that's not particularly showing up well at this point in the season is the difference in getting that crop off to a weed-free start out there. If we look, this treatment here, the mid-April removal timing compared to the mid-May, same planting date on all of this. This treatment, the corn was more uniform. It was 6 to 8 inches taller than the mid-May treatment. But let's say we use a product like Verdict. What kind of residual control would you expect to get out of that product? How long?
Four or 5 weeks.
4 or 5 weeks, somewhere 3 to 5 weeks, depending on weather conditions. So we're 2 months after treatment here. You can see that that early residual did its job. It got that crop off to a weed-free start. So in these non-residual plots, particularly this mid-May one, we saw quite a bit of weeds taking up nitrogen that you maybe would not have seen with using a residual chemistry there. And that's another factor in this story. If we look at some of these, it kind of tells the same story, just like we saw in the tent there. Burn down with a residual, the earliest treatment here, the mid-April time of removal. This plot has basically stayed clean for the entire year. This is probably where our highest yield potential is, at least in this scenario. This mid-May treatment, it looks quite good now, but there was probably quite a bit of early season, or there may have been some of that unexplained reason for yield loss that Mark was talking about. You know, you guys, they didn't see water stress in there, but they did see a yield reduction. So there's probably some hidden yield loss in these plots, even though they look quite good right now.
There's nitrogen in the winter annual biomass. So this is the 2 years scow corn and scow soybeans that I showed you before in 2009. So this is nitrogen in terms of pounds per acre that we harvested at the different removal timings, either November, March 15th, April 1st, April 15th, May 1st, May 15th, June 1st, June 15th. And so you can see up until about April 15th, the most that we'd lost was about 10 pounds of nitrogen. By May 1st it jumped to 25. By May 15th we're almost up to 30, and then by delaying it clear into June, where volunteer wheat was one of our weeds here, it pushed it later, and we're at 50 bushels per acre. Okay, similar story in soybeans. It's pretty flat. It starts to go up in mid-April and then it peaks in the June time. So one of our thinkings is, in addition to light, which is challenging to measure, we're also taking a lot of nitrogen that would be readily available for the crop right at the beginning. We're tying it up in winter annual wheat biomass, and then the crop gets off to a slower start. There's less total nitrogen available. Okay. So winter annual control before corn. I think we've got good tools before corn and soybeans in general. We have a lot more pre-tools in soybean than we do post-tools, so that's where we really should focus some of our efforts. Our thinking is that you choose at least one for a burn down, and preferably two, where we have so many meristil problems with glyphosate plus 2,4-D or glyphosate plus a dicamba, and then come back with a residual that's got multiple prongs. So Corvus plus atrazine. The Corvus, you've got a grass herbicide, you've got a broadleaf herbicide, and then the atrazine seems to keep both of them up. Fierce is a product that will be coming out next year. That's Valor plus a brand new grass herbicide called pyroxasulfone. Within Fierce, they don't have very high rates. BASF will have a product called Zidua, where you'll be able to boost that rate just a little bit. But it has proved fairly effective in our studies. Numax and Lexar have been very effective, both at burning down our winter annual weeds and then giving us a good residual. Prequil is a combination of Balance and Resolve that we've had some success with in our plots, and then Verdict is the Sharpen plus Outlook premix from BASF. It's been good. Okay, with soybeans, dicamba is not currently labeled. When we get dicamba beans, that will be a very good option for our pre-plant burn down. Right now we just have glyphosate plus 2,4-D. And you mentioned the concern they used to apply 2,4-D and now they don't want to because of the waiting period. But if we can get them to spray before they plant, then that's not going to be as big an issue. Get out early. Authority First is a combination of First Rate plus Authority. Authority XL is Authority plus Classic. Fierce will also be labeled for soybeans. Optil is a premix of Sharpen plus Pursuit. Neither Extreme or Tackle have been very effective, and Valor XLT is Valor plus Classic. Any of the products that have had Classic with them, we've seen very good residual activity and have been happy with them in our trial. And then the Sharpen plus Pursuit have also had very good success with that. That's been a nice product. But again, you're getting two modes of action, you're getting good residual. But think about that. You can get them to go out in mid-April with a good burn down and then a solid full rate of a residual. They should have a clean field to plant, and they'll be well set up for the rest of their growing season.